Hi everyone, it's Andrea from Movers and Bakers. Today I'm going to share with you how I make my beautiful red velvet cookies. These are beautiful chocolate and vanilla flavoured cookies, wonderfully chewy in the middle, studded with white chocolate chips. You are going to love them. Let's get baking. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to put my butter into my mixing bowl. This is 115 grams of butter. If you don't remember the quantities, as always, I will be putting a link below this video to my website where you can find all the quantities of these ingredients in cups and in grams. But here in the UK, we work in grams, so that's why I always talk in grams. So that's my butter in my bowl. I'm just going to soften it a little bit just to make it easier to mix with my sugar in a minute. There we go, that's my butter softened, and I do this quite often in cooler months here in the UK, so the autumn, winter, early spring kind of months, just because I find my butter isn't quite soft enough for me to be able to mix my sugar in very easily, so I always do them separately first. But that took me about 10 or 20 seconds. It was just to get it soft enough so the sugar mixes in easily. So to my butter, I'm going to add 100 grams of soft light brown sugar. Now I make my own light brown sugar at home. You can find the link to that, the recipe for that if you want to, if you just follow the card above, but you can absolutely use store-bought as well. And to that, I'm also going to add 50 grams of caster sugar. Now, when I mix these together, I don't actually want my butter and sugar to be light and fluffy like you would in other recipes. I just want to mix it. The only reason today I am using a hand whisk instead of doing it by hand with a spatula or anything like that is just for ease, because I am feeling a bit lazy and I want cookies quick. And that is it. That is my butter and sugar mixed up. That has taken me literally about 30 seconds to do. Super, super quick. Don't forget, if you like my videos, to like this video and to subscribe as well, so you always know when I release new ones. So to my butter and sugar, going back to our cookies, I'm going to add some more wet ingredients. So I have 1 egg here. I'll crack that in. And with that, I'm also going to add some vanilla. Now I've got about 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla here. Again, this is homemade vanilla, but shop-bought vanilla is brilliant. Just make sure when you use vanilla that you use vanilla extract, not vanilla essence, because then you get the actual vanilla and it's a much better flavor you'll get from your bakes. So vanilla extract, not vanilla essence. And my last ingredient is some food coloring. Now, once upon a time when red velvet was made in the cake form, the red color actually came very naturally as a result of the cocoa powder reacting with the vinegar. In my recipe here for cookies, I'm not going to put any vinegar in. So to give us that red color, I'm going to use red food coloring. And a lot of cakes today will put extra red food coloring in as well, instead of relying on the reaction to get the red color. So I'm going to use the brand that I much prefer to use rather than supermarket owned brands, which tend to be really runny and watery and give you a really weak color. I actually prefer to use Sugar Flare paste. So it's a paste color. It does get everywhere, you can see on my hands. So you will find that this will stain things very easily. So you have to be a little bit aware of that as you use it. Now I bake a lot, as you know, so that's why I have a really big tub of it. You do get them in really small tubs and you can get them easily on Amazon. I will put a link below if that's something that you want to look at as well. But this is my really big tub because I do lots of baking, and you can see it's very much like a gel, like a paste. So in this recipe in particular, I am not going to use a spoon, but I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm going to get about 1/4 teaspoon's worth. Now you'll find that this is actually very, very intense color because there's not much liquid. It doesn't affect the consistency of your batter, whether it's cake or cookies or whatever you're doing. It's brilliant in that sense because you're not having to then compensate with other dry ingredients because you've got extra moisture going in. And it's really concentrated color, so you will get a really lovely color for not actually having to use that much. Where in the past, when I've used liquid colors, I'll put a couple of drops of red in and I'll end up with a very pale pink. This gives you a strong color pretty much straight away with a very small amount. So that's about 1/4 teaspoon's worth. I'm just going to scrape that off onto my mixture. So time to mix. So you can see there how that tiny little amount of food coloring has made my whole mixture really quite a bright red. So that is all my wet ingredients done. So now it's time for my dry ingredients. I'm just going to detach these for a minute while I get my dry ingredients in. So as you know, I like to sift my ingredients in. You don't need to do this, but I just find that I don't get the lumps, which makes it easier to mix it all together. So into my sieve, I'm going to put some plain flour. This is 180 grams of plain flour, 15 grams of cocoa powder, and then smaller quantities, I've got baking powder. This is half a teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda, 2 teaspoons of corn flour. Now I find corn flour in my cookies actually makes my cookies really soft, and that gives them that chewiness. So I like to put corn flour in. Not all cookie recipes will have corn flour in, so don't be surprised if you find some that don't. Well, sift all of that in. And my last dry ingredient to go in is half a teaspoon of salt. Now, I always use unsalted butter, which is why I put extra salt in, but I find that that's better that way because I have control of how much salt goes into my bakes, and I much prefer it that way. If you use salted butter, you will end up with a slightly saltier cookie, but make sure as well that you don't include extra salt in with your dry ingredients when you put them in. So, time to mix all this together again. And again, I'm going to mix this only just until it's combined. Like I said earlier, I am just using my beaters for convenience. And when your mixture is almost combined, I tend to stop because we've got one more ingredient to put in. So all I'm going to do now with this last little bit of flour along the edges that I've not scraped down is I'm just going to tip my white chocolate chips in. Now in this cookie I prefer to use white chocolate chips over milk or dark, but if you prefer milk or dark, by all means go for it. It reminds me a lot of a cream cheese frosting that you would have, a cream cheese icing that you would have on a red velvet cake normally. Now I've just realized I was so busy talking to you that I didn't mean to tip all my white chocolate chips in. I tend to keep a handful of them behind. This is 200 grams of white chocolate chips, but I tend to keep a handful of them behind just so I can stud my cookies before they go in the oven, and that makes sure that on the outside you can see these lovely white splodges of white chocolate against the red cookie. So we'll keep those aside and we'll come back to those a bit later. Mixing them up, you just want to press them in so you're scraping the sides and getting all that flour in, and just press these in. Try to be a bit gentle so you don't break the chocolate chips, and you just want to get them completely combined. So your mixture will be really, really stiff, as you can see, and that is fine. That's what's going to help the cookies not flatten out when they bake in the oven, but they're going to hold their shape better so you get that lovely chewy middle. So don't worry if it feels a little stiff, that's exactly how you want it to be. So once you have got your cookie dough all mixed up, we are going to chill it. Now I find with these cookies that they actually work better when chilled in the freezer for about half hour rather than in the fridge, but you can put them in the fridge as well if you wanted to leave them for a bit longer. So these cookies, I make them a bit bigger than my normal cookies. This mixture is going to make about 6 or 7 cookies, depending on how I scoop them. So I have with me here a really, really large ice cream scoop. You don't need to use an ice cream scoop, you could use a couple of spoons. I would encourage you, if you're not going to use something specific like an ice cream scoop, to weigh each cookie so that you have more or less the same weight of cookies, just because it's then going to help when you bake them later that they're going to bake really evenly rather than some of them baking quicker and some of them slower because they're different sizes. So this mixture will be about each of the cookies, if you did weigh them, I should have said, each of the cookies will be about 100 grams each. So what you want to do is once you've scooped your cookie, you're going to scoop it, pop it out on your tray, and I'm going to actually pick them up and roll them in my hands just to make them into really, really good balls and make all of the mixture stick together really well. And once you have got your cookie ball, we're going to get those few chocolate chips that we set aside before. Now you absolutely don't need to do this. You can put this, like I said earlier, all of this can go in there, but I just find that if you have these studded on the top of your cookie dough balls, that you end up with them looking lovely on the outside because you can get some really clean white chips on the outside that are visible. So I'm just going to stud these with, if I don't lose my baking tray, I'm just going to stud these with about 8 to 10 chocolate chips, and make sure you can actually go around the side, just because of how the cookies spread when they bake. They will spread out, so even the ones slightly on the side will end up on the top. So you just want to stud them a little bit randomly, wherever you've got a few gaps, and that's just going to give you some lovely white chips on the outside of your cookie. So I'm going to do this with the rest of my cookie dough, and then these are going to go chill out in my freezer for about 20 minutes, half an hour. About 10 minutes before I'm ready to bake them, I'm going to turn my oven on to 180, and then these cookies will bake in there. Mine take me 14 minutes exactly, but depending on your oven, it could be anything from 13 to 15 minutes. You want them to come out before they are completely done, and then make sure, this is really important, make sure you cool them, allow them to cool on the actual baking sheet that you've baked them on. Do not move them onto a cooling rack, because the warmth of the baking sheet will keep cooking them, so they will cook for a little bit longer, which is why you pull them out before they're completely cooked. So you want to leave them on the baking sheet for about half an hour after, until they are quite cool. And I will see you on the other side once my cookies are baked. So my cookies are done. I could only fit, as you can see on my baking sheet, I could only fit 4 on, because they do spread out quite a lot. So they baked for 14 minutes, and then I've left them to cool on the baking tray for a further half hour, and they are beautiful. So I want to show you what the inside of these beautiful cookies are like. So they are really soft. They're going to be beautifully chewy, almost cakey, but not quite there. They are absolutely divine, and they are really quite easy to make. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like it if you have. Do let me know if you make it. I want to hear from you in the comments below, and let me know how yours turn out. You can, of course, unlike me, you can make them smaller or bigger, up to you, but if you do any modifications, again, let me know how you do it and how they turn out for you. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to subscribe, and I shall see you next time. Happy baking.